The US steps in to save the yen, proof that Iran is heading toward victory. The US Treasury has intervened in the currency market to rescue the Japanese yen. The first such move in 28 years. Who would have thought that while America was fighting Iran, Iran hasn't buckled, but the yen has collapsed first. On the 1st of August 2026, Reuters photographed US Treasury Secretary Bessent's notepad during the cabinet meeting at Camp David. On it was written a line that translates to do buy yen $5 billion to $10 billion. This was handwritten by the Treasury Secretary himself, sitting at the cabinet table, and within hours of writing it, the US did indeed step in to buy yen, pulling the dollar-yen rate from around 163 back to the 1.5, a level according to foreign media reports. This was the first time in nearly 28 years that the United States had directly intervened to support the yen. So why rescue the yen? Does America really care that much about Japan? Think about it, since the Iran war began, how many countries has Bessent handed out money to? In April, Gulf states like the UAE negotiated dollar swap lines with the US, and Bessent publicly endorsed them. In August, he personally intervened to save the yen. And every time after acting, he issued tough rhetoric. When saving the yen, he said, "We will do whatever it takes to support Japan, and we will not hesitate to participate in further joint intervention." Who was he speaking to? To speculators around the world who were shorting the yen and shorting us treasuries. Why go to such length? Because, as US Treasury Secretary, what he truly cares about is never Japan. It is that US treasuries must not collapse. Let me share a detail. This time, to rescue the yen, the US sold euros, not dollars. Bessent also pressured the Federal Reserve to expand its swap lines, so that the Bank of Japan could obtain dollars without having to sell treasuries. All this maneuvering was simply to avoid selling us bonds. This isn't saving Japan, it is protecting US treasuries. Remember what I said before. I said the logic of us warfare has changed. In the past, whenever America went to war, whether it won or lost, it could still profit. It was an empire that grew stronger with war, stronger with more debt. But now, because of China's existence, that logic has flipped. Bessent's intervention to save the yen is the best proof. Because if the yen collapses, US treasuries are in trouble. The war has now reached the financial front. What is the yen? As I've explained in previous videos, the yen is the most important funding currency in global carry trades. Hedge funds around the world are used to borrowing yen because interest rates are low, then converting them into dollars or other assets to make profits. Once the yen depreciates sharply and yen assets become unstable, these carry trades have to be unwound en masse. Unwinding means selling off the assets they hold and buying back yen to repay loans. The first thing they sell is US treasuries, and the US Treasury market is the foundation of global finance. Underneath that foundation, everything is leveraged. Federal Reserve research shows that as of September 2025, hedge funds held roughly $2.4 trillion in long positions on US treasuries. What does that mean? If treasury prices fall, these funds have to post more margin. If they can't, they sell. Selling drives prices lower. Lower prices trigger more margin calls. It is a downward spiral. And don't think $2.4 trillion is the limit of this bomb. Because these hedge funds can use their treasuries as collateral to borrow and buy UK gilts, then use those gilts as collateral to buy European bonds. It is a chain of interlocking bets, each link heavily leveraged. If this blows up, it won't be just America that dies. So Iran's current strategy is, in essence, the classic "you fight your way, I fight my way." Iran doesn't need to defeat the US military, it only needs to make us treasuries a problem. Because once treasuries are in turmoil, the dollar is in turmoil, and once the dollar is in turmoil, America can't even fund its war military spending. Alliance networks, global credibility all fall apart. So Bessent's scribble on that notepad is evidence that the US financial system is the first to crack. The war isn't over, but the financial system is already in distress. So this war, America has already lost. It is not me being bearish on America. Even the New York Times has admitted it. The Times just published a report saying, word for word, Trump's goals remain unfulfilled, and the United States appears to be heading towards strategic failure. Iran's nuclear program and ballistic missile program have not been destroyed, and the Strait of Hormuz is effectively under Iranian control. The war has made both the United States and Israel weaker. Let's revisit America's pre-war objectives. First, end Iran's nuclear program. Second, destroy Iran's missile capabilities. Third, cut off Iran's support for all its proxies. Fourth, achieve regime change. Now look at the results. The nuclear program has not been ended. Missile capabilities have not been destroyed. Not a single proxy has been cut off. Regime change has not happened. The regime is not only still there, but more stable than before. Of the four goals, not one has been achieved, and the war drags on. Let's review this war and see the drama. Air defense systems like Patriots. Before the war, there were about 450 interceptors. Now only around 250 remain. That means Patriot inventory has been depleted by about 60 to 70%, and Da'ad by about 40%. What does only 800 interceptors mean? Iran could launch dozens or even over 100 missiles and drones in a single saturation attack, with so many bases and allies in the Middle East to protect. 800 is far from enough, and that is just defensive munitions. Reuters reports that US long-range precision missiles are nearly all used up, including ATACMS short-range ballistic missiles and Tomahawk cruise missile stocks are also nearly half consumed. CNN put it bluntly, rebuilding these stockpiles will take years. The Pentagon has poured nearly $100 billion into accelerating munitions production, but the war isn't over and the production lines haven't even warmed up. That is a classic case of far water can't quench a near fire. The latest reports are even more telling. The Washington Post revealed on the 5th of August that Trump, at the Camp David cabinet meeting, confronted Defense Secretary Hegseth directly, demanding to know why there was a munitions shortage and why nobody had told him. Trump thought he had solved this problem long ago. Hegseth immediately shifted the blame to Deputy Secretary Feinberg. The White House and the Pentagon have since denied the story, calling it fake news. But whether the argument actually happened or not, the munitions shortage is real. The second weakness is that the US has lost the initiative to escalate. Have you ever wondered why Trump keeps shouting about destroying Iran but never acts? On the 1st of August, he posted that America was locked and loaded to unleash military terror on Iran that hasn't been seen since World War II. And yet, again, he didn't strike. In March, he gave Iran a 48-hour ultimatum surrender or be destroyed, and then he backed down. In April, he threatened to bomb Iran back to the 17th century, and then backed down. In June, another threat. In July, another in August, yet again, locked and loaded, and then called off. 5 times. Every time. Thunderous rhetoric but little action. Why? Not because Trump is soft-hearted, but because he really dares not escalate. Because Iran holds matching cards. If the US massively bombs Iran's power or oil facilities, Iran will escalate by striking Gulf states' desalination plants and oil facilities. Here is a number. Gulf countries rely almost entirely on desalination for drinking water, Kuwait and Qatar over 90%, the UAE around 70%. Iran has not hit these facilities yet. Those are cards held in reserve. If the US escalates, that card will be played immediately. And the other side has already demonstrated the Houthis have started hitting Saudi pipelines and tankers. Saudi Arabia was so scared that its crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, personally called Trump begging him to stop. If America truly escalates the war, the first to collapse won't be Iran, but its own overseas allies, including Israel. So look, senior US officials recently sent an email to a group of military analysts soliciting opinions. The exact wording: we are looking for new, creative, unconventional ways to pressure and punish Iran. This is not the world's strongest military making a plan. This is running out of ideas. Folks, this is asking for advice in a group chat. The Financial Times put it very bluntly. Washington is increasingly fighting the war at the pace set by Tehran. The third weakness, which many overlooks, is oil. Before the war, many analysts argued that because the US is a net oil exporter, it could profit from selling oil during the conflict. That judgment was wildly wrong. Oil is not all the same. Let's look at data in early 2020. US refineries imported about 6.5 million barrels per Dalton Y of foreign crude, while exporting about 3.8 million barrels per Dalton Y. Why? Because US refineries are designed for heavy, high sulfur crude from Canada and Venezuela, while domestic shale oil is light, sweet crude, chemically incompatible. In other words, America extracts its own light oil, while importing the heavy oil its refineries need. It is a net exporter in name, but in reality it cannot be cut off from international markets. If the Strait of Hormuz is closed, 20% of global oil supply is affected. Once Iran closes the strait, as the New York Times noted, if the US really goes all out against Iran, oil prices will spike and us inflation will explode first. Moreover, you must understand oil reserves aren't all recoverable. Much of it is too costly or energy intensive to extract. The easy oil has largely been pumped. What remains is harder and harder to get, and the energy cost of extraction keeps rising. Without a transition to new energy, relying on oil to survive is inherently unsustainable. This war, on the surface, is a US-Iran conflict, but in reality it is a stress test, not for Iran, but for the American imperial system. Military industrial capacity, financial credibility, energy structure, alliance networks all now show cracks. Insufficient production means you can't defend. Can't defend means you can't protect allies. Can't protect allies means you dare not escalate. Dare not escalate means you can only be punched in the two weak spots, finance and oil by Iran. So why is Trump still hanging on? I personally think his only goal now is to drag things out until after the midterm elections, and then surrender gracefully. To admit defeat now would be to acknowledge he started a war he can't win, and that would end his political life. If he waits until after the elections, maybe the public focus will shift. That is likely his calculation. Beyond that, I really cannot see any benefit for America in continuing this war. The logic of war has changed, and so has the world order. America can no longer profit by throwing the world into chaos. In the old days, it didn't need to rescue Japan, it could just let Japan die. Because after Japan's collapse, all its capital would flow back to the US. But today, America's grip on the Middle East, its control over oil, and its domination of the monetary system are all visibly loosening. This world can no longer return to the era when America called all the shots. Finally, I'd like to raise a question. Is America's failure really all Trump's fault? Now, even American elites are looking for reasons. One very famous economist, Paul Krugman, a Nobel laureate, recently wrote an article titled China Won the Iran War. The gist is Trump squandered a good hand. Let me tell you, after reading it, my first reaction was to laugh. His conclusion is right, but his reasoning is utterly wrong. What does Krugman criticize Trump for? For not knowing how to manage the empire, but he never questions the legitimacy of hegemony itself. He thinks America's rule of the world is natural and justified. Trump merely used the wrong methods, failed to unite allies, and thus couldn't beat Iran. That is not real reflection. What truly caused America to lose is not Trump, but the logic of empire itself. That logic is the root of the disaster, with allies or without. The outcome is the same. As long as you think you can live by controlling others, one day someone will teach you a lesson. And why did China win? Not because China is so clever, my friends, but because the world is truly fed up with American hegemony, whether it is Krugman-style left liberals or Trump-style far-right, all of them. Get out. What people want is very simple, a world without hegemony, based on mutual respect. China simply stood on the right side of history.